callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. Are you a family caregiver? Are you caregiving for someone who can no longer take care of themselves? Are you overwhelmed? This is Caregiver Solutions Info with Marcia Teal. Marcia will be hosting an hour of true stories and information, tips and updates of the latest research and necessary information in the caregiving field, focusing on you, the family caregiver. An Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert, Marcia has 15 years of hands-on experience at Arden Courts, a leader in assisted living dementia communities here in the U.S. Marcia covers everything you need to know as a family caregiver, especially if you care for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease or other related dementia or chronic illness. If you have a friend or relative that is also a family caregiver, call them now. They won't want to miss a minute. And let them know they can watch on caregiversolutions.info. And they can listen on WNN 1470 AM in South Florida or nationally on the iHeartRadio app. Now, sit back, relax, and learn from our host, Marcia Teal, as she brings information to you that may just be the caregiving solution you need.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Caregiver Solutions Info Show. I'm your host, Marcia Teal, and I'm so glad that you could join us today. This show is about caregiving. This show is for caregivers. This show puts an emphasis on caring for others that can't care for themselves and also caring for caregivers that become overwhelmed and stressed out trying to give that care. So it's a wonderful educational program for people that need to learn or want to learn more about the progression of the disease. We pretty much talk about dementia, different matter, whether it's Alzheimer's, Parkinson's type dementia, frontal temporal lobe, vascular dementia. If it's memory loss, then this is the place to be. So I am so happy that you're here because today we're going to be talking about healthcare options. Now, we all are going to age. There's no way around it, can't get out of it. We're all aging. And people really want to age in place. We all prefer to stay in our own home. A lot of times people, when they get married and they make vows to take care of each other through thick and thin and sickness and health, what does that really mean? And are you going against your vows when you need to put someone in a higher level of care for their own good and for their quality of life? So when it comes to that, it can be very overwhelming and confusing because there are so many different long-term care options. If someone's home and they can't be home anymore or shouldn't be home anymore, I mean, it could be your grandparents, it could be a parent, it could be a spouse, it could be a friend. Home is not always the best place to be for many reasons. So what are the care options? Well, you could get care inside the home with a home health aide, a caregiver, an aide to come in and help take care of somebody for a few hours a day, a few hours a week. Or you could go to a regular assisted living to live and get assistance with different activities of daily living. Or if memory becomes an issue, you have the option of a memory care assisted living, a little bit more specialized, or there's always the nursing home, what we know as a nursing home, the last place you go before you go to heaven. So how do families figure this out? How do they know where to start? How do they know the questions to ask? How do they know if they're making the right choice? So today we have a very seasoned professional here that's going to help us make all of this make sense. And her name is Liz Murphy. Liz is a registered nurse. She has over 40 years experience in nursing and in healthcare administration, with the last 12 years of her career as executive director of the memory care community Arden Courts in Sarasota, Florida. She's recently retired last December, and she's here now to help us navigate this topic, help us learn, and share in her wisdom. And I'm so glad to welcome her. Hi, Liz. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Marcia. Thanks for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm so glad that you're here. I have to tell you, you look fantastic. So retirement must be doing well for you. We do miss you in the healthcare field, but I'm glad that you are finding your next chapter, and that's wonderful. And congratulations to that. But you are so willing to talk about what the topic is, and we could say it's not about you, and we're going to talk about what that means in a minute. But you have helped families, thousands of families through the years with this particular problem. How do I know? What do I do? What do I ask? What do I look for? I'm so confused. I have no idea. And what if I make the wrong choice? So thank you for being here and talking about that. The first question I want to ask you, though, with all of your experience, most recently with the 12 years you spent in a memory care community, Arden Courts, what did you enjoy the most about that time there?
Well, I think what I enjoyed the most, Marcia, was that every day was different. When you work with residents that have memory issues, you never know what you're going to come across on a day-to-day basis. And as you're working with the residents, there are days when they say something or they do something that makes everybody laugh, or is a reminder of what they, how they lived their life before. So it just that every day, as I would be walking around, or I would, talk to residents, every day would be like a new day. I remember when years ago when I was in a community. Actually, I think it was when I was in our Arden Courts in Pennsylvania. We had this resident. She was cute as can be, and you walk by and she'd smack you on the bum. So, those are the kinds of things that you always remember, you never forget. So it's those little things that make it a really good, like every day, on an everyday basis. Despite all the work that has to be done, those are the things that, especially when you're in the office, I like to spend a lot of time with the residents, so that makes each day worthwhile.
Well, it sounds like you're very passionate about your work. You obviously enjoyed it. You've been helping people for so many years, and I can tell by some of your stories that it brings joy to you to help other people. So I think sometimes it's a win-win. Working in healthcare, working with people with dementia. Some of my friends say, "How can you do it? I don't know how you can do that. It seems so hard." But when you have the heart for it and you are really dedicated to it, like I know you are, it becomes a joy, and it becomes not work. It becomes what you do. It becomes your life. So that being said, and I appreciate those comments because I feel the same way. It's just a wonderful feeling to see residents have little successes. I always say sometimes we see little miracles that are in the community because of what the community can provide to those residents. So it's a happy time. It is also a sad time for reasons, but overall, knowing that we do good, knowing that we're helping people is what it's about. So that being said, what would be your most frustrating things that bothered you by working in the same type of memory care community? What frustrated you about that?
I think when I think about like frustrating things, is you have to deal with the regulations and rules, and they change frequently, and so you have to be able to sort of change on the fly sometimes when things happen. And then communicating that to staff, sometimes explaining it to families when things change, when rules change or regulations change. And last month we could do this, but now this month, things have changed, so we can't do that. We can't maybe move somebody. We can't, move somebody from one area to another without going through a lot of like red tape. And because I was around in different states, it really got confusing sometimes, as to what you can and can't do, and how you could handle resident problems. And so you have to learn all the different rules and regulations and putting care plans together and what each state is different about what has to be on that plan. So that, to me, that was the most frustrating thing that I dealt with, and of course, staffing, trying to keep your levels up. So that, I think those two things would be the most frustrating that I encountered.
And then I could add to that, probably the COVID came and we had the pandemic, and that really is frustrating with all the extra, policies and procedures on top of regular things. So, I mean, anybody that works in healthcare, God bless them, because they are angels on earth. So, I want to show both sides of it, because even though it is frustrating, even though it's very trying at times, I think we triumph over that with the things that we are able to do and provide and help families and help residents. So it is so good to you to be here with us today. And we want to get into talking about how families navigate looking for help and knowing which type of care option they need for their loved one. It's very confusing for people that have never had to do it before. And so experts in the field can lend their expertise and their advice, and that's what we're going to glean from you right after we take this quick commercial break. So we'll be right back.
Somewhere at the corner of bewildered and confused is a lost mother, a father, a sibling, a grandparent. Wandering is a common symptom of Alzheimer's or related dementias, and can often make those who care for a loved one feel just as lost. If you're looking for a place that's safe and secure, look to Arden Courts. Memory care is all we do. We know, we understand, we can help. To learn more, visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines.
You are listening to your host, Marcia Teal, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on caregiversolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
We're back, and my special guest today is Liz Murphy. Liz is a registered nurse, and she's been in the healthcare field for over 40 years, helping families navigate this sometimes overwhelming and confusing healthcare system when it comes time to get more help for a loved one. So, Liz, if families are starting their search and they're looking for the right place, and maybe they have a parent or a spouse that needs more care because they can't do it at home. A lot of people do start with home health. We mentioned that earlier as an option, but it gets overwhelming for a caregiver to take on that role all by themselves. So they decide to start looking further. And sometimes they'll start at a regular assisted living and maybe not, and maybe they'll start at a memory care. What are some of the factors that families should consider when they are beginning their search for more care?
So when somebody is just looking to start and looking for care for a loved one, it's important to always keep uppermost in your mind what does that person need? What is going to serve the interests and the needs and services of your loved one? Not so much what the family member might need or an adult child might need. It's looking to see what your loved one needs. What do they need in terms of care? What do they need in terms of socialization? Is a facility, assisted living with a unit, will that serve those needs? Will a freestanding community like an Arden Courts serve those needs? It's not about, sometimes it's people look at the glitz and glamour, they look at the chandeliers and how fancy the lobby is, but it's not really about that. It's about what it's about going beyond the door and in the resident care areas. It's about what is happening behind those doors. It's important, if you can, before you go to facilities, is that you try to find out what their survey history is. You know, some, not every state, but a lot of the states have that information online. So you can go and you can look up the Department of Health information and see what kind of surveys they've had. You can, you should, when you go to a community, you want to ask about the turnover rates of the staff. Then the main difference between a freestanding community and a facility with a unit is sometimes it's the education of the staff, because that's all that facility does is memory care. So they concentrate on training the staff and caring for somebody. So that might be the best option for your loved one. And you want to find a community that is experienced in handling all levels of dementia, from early onset, ideally to the end of life, so that when somebody goes to a community, they'll be able to stay there from the time that they move in until the time where they need hospice. Now, there are things that would affect that. Not everybody can afford to have somebody there for that length of time. Sometimes their physical, medical condition changes, and the facility doesn't, based on state regulations, may not be able to keep that person there. So, except for those two things, finances and medical and physical condition, you ideally want somebody to be able to stay, and a lot of facilities today provide hospice services on site. So that's an important aspect to look for, I feel. And then with families, my experience, and this is really my observation and maybe my opinion, but I've seen over the years where a spouse looks for care. That's what's uppermost important to that person. But sometimes the adult children look for what is important to them. Me as a baby boomer, if I was to be in a facility, what I would want is going to be a lot different than somebody who's like 80 or 90 years old. So you have to try to balance that, and you want to think in the long term. You don't want to think, okay, well, this is what mom needs right now, and the facility can provide that, but also try to think about what's going to happen down the road. And so when you're looking at a community, you want to, when you tour a facility, and I know with COVID, it's been a long, hard road trying to tour communities, and a lot of times it's done on iPads, or it's done. I know some communities now are doing courtyard tours or porch tours, or so it's a little different. It's a little harder now to actually see a facility, and some families don't want to make any commitment or decisions unless they can actually see a facility, what's going on, and not really just from an iPad showing or video. So if you have the opportunity to tour a community, you want to ask about, get a copy of the menus. You want to maybe have a meal. You want to see how the staff is. It's really important when you're walking around to see if the staff is engaging, and are they, looking at you, or are they making eye contact, or are they saying hello? And an important, to me, something that's really important is how long has the staff been there? There are, I've been lucky enough in the communities that I've been in where staff have been there, 50% of the staff have been there more than 5 years. That's really an important thing, because that shows the stability of that community. And you want to look at that, because I really feel, and this is once again my opinion, is that experience trumps new all the time. So that if you're looking at a brand new community, that means all the staff there is new. So you don't really know how much experience they've had or where they've come from. But in an existing community, you can ask and find out how long have the staff been there. You know, how long have the nursing been there? How long has the caregiver been there? Because if they've been there a long time and they have made connections with the residents, and they have, they're invested in what they do a lot more. So I feel like that's really important. You want to make sure that the facility is clean and well maintained. Doesn't have to be, you know, like all glitz and glamour, like I said earlier, because that's not really what it's about. You want to make sure that, I'm thinking about the license, you know, look and see how that is. And not to say that when you walk into the lobby, that's where it starts. And you want to make sure that you're welcomed when you walk in and that you're not ignored, and that when you come in, you know, whoever is at the front desk, that's where it starts. And so if that person at the front desk is welcoming and offers you, you know, something to drink or whatever, you know, and the director comes out to greet you as you come into the facility and you're working with the marketer. The director should come out and make it a point, you know, to say hello. Those are the things that set the tone for the rest of your tour. So a lot of times, not a lot of times, but I've had experience where somebody moved in just because of the way the caregivers interacted with them during the tour, because they knew that if that's how they were during the tour, you know, they knew that their loved one would do well. There was in one facility where I was actually touring a family group, and one of the caregivers came up and introduced themselves and, you know, said how long they'd been in the community. And they said, oh, you know, I hope that, you know, your mom is in my house, you know, because I'll take really good care of her. You know, so those are the kinds of things that people should look for when they have to, you know, when it's time for somebody to be placed. You know, and a lot of that and the safety. When somebody moves to a community, it's all about safety as well. And they come into an environment where they're now going to be safe and secure. Because when somebody makes that decision to move somebody and to start looking, a lot of times it's because either the doctor told them that it's time to start looking, or there was some type of safety issue that occurred. You know, that somebody was out wandering in the neighborhood. When I speak with families, I say to them, because when they're deciding if they're on the fence, you know, and because mom or dad is home right now and they feel like they're doing well, I always will say, well, if there was a fire or something going on, would your parent know to leave and to call 911? And if the answer is no, then that's a trigger right there that they should move forward with trying for placement. So it's all those things that are important, and that's why I sort of coined that phrase. It's not about you, because it's totally, to me, it's totally about your loved one. It's totally about the person who needs placement and what's going to serve that person the best, you know. And I've told with spouses, even with adult children, I frequently will say, you know, you're tired, you're taking care of somebody at home, but now, once they come to the community, you get to go back to being the spouse. You get to go back to being the adult child, you know, because now we're taking care of that person. And, you know, that's that burden, not that burden, but that constant 24/7 responsibility has been taken away now, and we'll take that responsibility. So those are all the things that I employ when I'm talking to somebody, to a family.
Wow, that was awesome because you covered so much territory. You told us what we needed to look for and the questions to ask, and it was very detailed. And right there, it's you laid it all out, and it's so important for caregivers to know that and to use that as a guide so that they feel that they made the right decision at the right time, at the right place, for the right reasons. There is so much that goes into it, and you hit it right, the nail on the head every time, Liz, with all that really, really good advice. So we're going to take a break so we can thank our national sponsor, and when we come back, there's going to be more great information from Liz Murphy with all of her expertise in the field of healthcare, and you don't want to miss it, so stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Arden Courts is not just a place to live, it's a place to call home. Residential living combined with quality caregiving. This is the philosophy behind Arden Courts. Communities created exclusively for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia who would benefit from a safe and structured environment. For additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides, call 888-478-2410 to locate a community nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help because memory care is all we do. Remember, call 888-478-2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides. You are listening to your host, Marcia Teal, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on caregiversolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
At this time, I'd like to thank our national sponsor, Arden Courts Memory Care Communities. Arden Courts is a leader when it comes to memory care. They have about 50 memory care assisted living communities throughout the United States, 10 right here in Florida where I am and where Liz is, my guest today. And they are a resource for caregivers. Not only do they help take care of people with memory loss, they help the caregivers too by education and helping them to feel they're important and how to help take care of their loved one even though they're not home anymore. They're still involved, and Arden, of course, stays involved with the family and the resident to help in any way they can. And today they want to help you just because you're listening or watching the show. They want to offer this particular book. It's called the 36-Hour Day book. It's a wonderful resource for caregivers. It is written by Dr. Peter Ravens and Nancy Mays, and it's a Bible, so to speak, of information, tips, directions, challenging situations, and how you can overcome them. It's a great resource for caregivers. You can read it chapter to chapter, front to back, or pick and choose depending upon what your particular issue is at any particular time. And the book is absolutely free to you just for the asking. All you have to do is send an email with your name, address, and telephone number, and they'll send a book right to your doorstep. That email address is delray@arden-courts.com. Again, send the email to Delray, DELRAY, at arden-courts.com. You'll be so happy that you did. If you don't have this book, I recommend you getting it. If you know somebody that could benefit from this book, order it for them. They'll be very grateful to have the information and the resource. So today my guest is Liz Murphy. She's a registered nurse, and she's been in the healthcare field over 40 years, not only in nursing but also in healthcare administration. And the last 12 years of her career, because she recently retired, she was executive director of the Arden Courts Memory Care Community of Sarasota, Florida. So we're talking about what families need to know when they're needing more care for a loved one, what to look for. And Liz, you were just spot on with all of that great advice. So I want to turn the channel a little bit and talk about the family in particular that did their research, maybe received all that good education and looked up everything and did their homework, but yet they can't let go. They feel guilty. They feel guilty just thinking about letting go. Maybe if they did let go, they still feel guilty that they did, even if it's a good fit. In your experience with all the families over the years, what's your take on the guilt and why the families feel so guilty and what they could do to try to overcome that?
Well, sometimes families feel guilty because they made a commitment or a promise to their parents that they would never place them in a community. And yet, today's world where we're pre-COVID or where people worked, both like husband and wife have to work, it's difficult to take care of somebody at home. There are stories of people who gave up their jobs to stay home to take care of somebody with dementia in the home. But once again, the safety factors, or sometimes people have behavior, so it becomes a situation where they can't be at home. They're not safe to be at home. And the people that are taking care of them 24/7, they can't go out, they can't, they don't have any other, time to themselves. And so it's a quandary because they know that they need more care than what they're getting. If they brought outside care in for their parent or spouse, a lot of times that spouse or parent fired the caregiver. That story is very common. We tried to get, we brought caregivers in for mom or dad, but they insist they don't need it, and so they fired them. The other situation when people feel guilty is because if it's a parent, a mom and dad, and the spouse that was the primary caregiver passes away, and now it becomes apparent that for years it's been hidden just what the level of dementia is for the surviving parent. And so I think people feel guilty because they didn't know that. And so now they have to make a decision. What are we going to do? Because we didn't know that mom was like this and now dad has passed away. So sometimes things have to happen like on the fly. So they'll bring somebody into their home, or I've had experience with families where they rotate. If it's a large family, they might take turns staying with the person with dementia. And when it comes time for placement, people do they feel guilty that they have to do that. If they've been able to take care of somebody one-on-one and they have to bring them into a community, it's difficult because we have to explain that we're going to take care of that person, but reality is that we don't do, and we can't, we don't have the ability to do one-to-one care for our residents. So unless somebody is fortunate enough to have the funds to bring in private duty, that's something else that they have to reconcile with, because that's not the way that they want it. Because clearly, if you're taking care of somebody one-on-one, they're getting probably the very best care that they can. And when you come in a community, that one-to-one care is not always available, unless somebody provides it on a private basis. So there's all those things go into playing why somebody is guilty, feels guilty about placing somebody, or before they even bring somebody in. At that time, in an effort to work with the family members, we might say, we have family advocates here. there's relatives of residents that are here now, or residents that were here previously, who were in the same situation as you are, and they'd be more than happy to speak with you. And so that works too, to have a family advocates, because then they're getting information from someone who's been there, someone who's had the experience, whether it's, somebody who procrastinated because, they promised that they wouldn't place, mom or dad, or somebody who had to place their parent or spouse on an emergency basis because it was a safety issue. So it's, it's hard, it's hard for anybody to have to place a loved one. And a lot of times, I guess when they're coming from a home situation, it's the most difficult, having to come from home into a community. And that's when people are really guilty, or feel guilty. And then that's where support groups are helpful. Even prior to moving somebody in, we would recommend that you should go to a local support group. We would tell them, like, if the facility has it on site, or where they can go, because that would help them get over the guilt that they might feel about having to place someone. So those are some of the options, when somebody, is reluctant or feels guilty. No matter what we as the staff say, and we can reassure them. But I think if they hear it from another family member, I think that carries a lot more weight, because that's somebody who has firsthand experience, whereas some of us may not have had that. In one of the communities I was in, I was fortunate enough to have one of the employees, one of our coordinator group, the management group, had a parent that was in the community. And so she was an excellent person to talk to prospective resident families who feel guilty, because that's exactly what happened with her. And she actually had her mother in like 3 different communities before she brought her to Arden Courts. And she was always happy with the care. And then essentially, like, she's that person that she was so happy that she actually started working for Arden Courts after her mother passed. So she's been there ever since, 19 years later. So there's a lot of ways to address that situation. I don't think that if somebody feels guilty, I don't think they're ever going to absolve themselves of that guilt, because they're always, going to feel that. But if they bring somebody in and they see that they're well cared for and that they're happy and that they adjust, because sometimes when somebody moves in, a family member might say, "Oh, I don't think they're going to adjust," and then, once they move in, they adjust immediately, and so it's like a surprise, like, oh, and I think that when I explain that to families, the way I explain it is that at home, there's a lot of pressure on somebody with dementia in the home setting. They have expectations, they're told, well, brush your teeth, take a shower, you have to do this, it's time for dinner. They're asked questions, what do you want? What do you want for dinner? When they're really not capable of answering those questions, or to adequately brush, their teeth, or to take a shower. And I explain to them that once they come to our community, all that pressure is taken away. They don't, the person does not have that stress of having to answer to somebody, having, to make decisions. We do that, we help them and we make it for them, because they might be at that level where they just can't do it. And I know that families want their loved one to be the way that they were, but the reality is that they're the way that they are. And it's, you have to be willing to accept that and deal with that. And I think that's where we help a lot with that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. You said before that someone comes in and they adjust so quickly. It's a surprise to the family how quickly someone takes to the new environment. And so I think families sometimes need to realize that home is not always the best place, because home can't offer everything a community can offer. And if you did, it would be so extraordinarily expensive, because you'd have to provide, everything that the community does, 24/7, care, nursing care around the clock, and, the chef to cook the meals, and someone to entertain you all day long with activities. And so families,
Yes.
Don't see the big picture, I don't think sometimes. They're nitpicking on the little things, like nobody's going to take care of mom the way I do. Well, probably not exactly, but pretty close to it, and it's going to get done, and we'll try to do it the way you do, but it's not you, and it's not about you, like you said earlier, the topic, today's discussion. It's not about you. And so it can actually be a better environment and healthier for certain people to let go, because home is too stressful. I was talking to a daughter just this week, and she's the primary caregiver for her mom. And her mom is constantly repeating herself, asking the same questions over and over and over. And the daughter is trying to be patient and answer the questions, but you can just see in her voice when she's talking about this how frustrated she gets, how angry she gets that mom just doesn't get it, and mom keeps repeating herself, and the daughter just keeps trying to say the same thing over and over, and it's not getting through. And so the daughter gets frustrated. Now the mother's getting frustrated because the mother is feeling those feelings. She's mirroring the daughter, because obviously she can feel what's going on even if she can't really understand it. And it just becomes, a snowball effect. So it's not a good situation. And families really have to take a hard, close look at what's really going on and how people can provide care in a different environment that's going to be better for so many reasons. So that's what this topic is about today, options, and it's not about you, it's about your loved one. So we're going to take our next break, and we'll be back with our closing thoughts with Liz Murphy on Caregiver Solution Info Show. We'll be right back.
Arden Court's Memory Care Community has the expertise and experience to simplify and enhance your loved one's life, and to protect you, finding the peace of mind you deserve. Come, see the difference in a facility like Arden Courts that is 100% dedicated to Alzheimer's and dementia care can have on your loved one. Call us at 888-478-2410 or visit our website, arden-courts.com. You are listening to your host, Marcia Teal, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on caregiversolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
I'm talking with Liz Murphy, registered nurse for over 40 years in nursing and healthcare administration, and her last 12 years before she retired, executive director at the Arden Courts Memory Care Community in Sarasota, Florida. So, Liz, this is so wonderful to talk to you about your experiences and your advice for families. I want to talk a few minutes about when families, because of guilt or denial or many other reasons, don't seek memory care, even though a parent has memory issues. They decide to go into a regular assisted living, and it won't be too long before they might realize that's not working. And so what could be the consequences of a family placing a loved one in a regular assisted living instead of memory care when that person is confused or maybe some disorientation, but they seem like they're okay, so the families think they'll be okay in a regular assisted living, but they soon find out that's not the case. What can happen, and what are those consequences that take effect onto that resident?
Well, I think a lot of the consequences revolve around socialization. And in a general assisted living, the residents generally have to get to programming on their own. They have the calendar, unlike in whether it's on the memory care unit or whether it's freestanding memory care, where when it's programming, we would tell somebody or escort them, and we would say it's time for such and such. We don't say, do you want to? Whereas in a general assisted living, if somebody encourages somebody to come to programming, they might say, do you want to? In which case the answer is going to be no, and then they'll just walk away. So then there comes social isolation, because they're not going to programming, they're not getting involved with other people. Meals are communal usually, and in a large dining room, which can be too much stimulation. It can, somebody could start having behaviors because it's just too much going on at one time. And I just want to say that the Mean Girls still live at 80. If you ever seen the movie Mean Girls, they don't change. If they're mean when they're 15, they're mean when they're 80. And what happens is they will exclude somebody. Many years I ran a retirement community, and as soon as somebody in the dining room, if somebody was starting to show dementia and confusion, they would tell the hostess, don't seat that person at our table. So a lot of it revolves around the socialization and the lack of it, and then people become isolated because they're not part of what's going on. And our experience in Arden Courts is that we did have several people move into our Sarasota building who came from the general assisted living portion of the neighboring communities because of that. Because that they were in the community and they weren't driving, they weren't, they would not come to programming, they weren't escorted to programming. And so when they came to us and they moved in, and we would say, come on, we're going to take you, we're waiting for you down in programming, and it's time to go. And they would start to flourish and they would succeed. So to be in a general assisted living to start out, once again, that goes back to what I said earlier about looking at the long term, not always looking at the short term. And look at the other residents that are in that general assisted living, and what are they doing? Are they taking care of themselves? Are they coming to programming, coming to the meals on their own? And what is your loved one doing? Is your loved one coming, or does somebody have to constantly remind them that it's mealtime? So sometimes in a general assisted living, people get left by the wayside because of those things. So that's why you have to always consider what's going to happen down the road. And although they were at home and they may have, it looked like they were doing okay at home, and you put them in general AL, it doesn't always work. It could have poor consequences.
I hear what you're saying. I'm talking with a daughter this week whose mother is in a general assisted living. The mom has dementia, and she's only been there 5 months, and now the daughter is now looking for something else because it's not working, and for exactly the things that you said. The mother's isolating, she's anxious, she doesn't know what to do with her time, she can't occupy herself, she wanders around her apartment not knowing what she's supposed to do with it. She doesn't go to programming or activities because she's afraid she might give the wrong answer and embarrass herself amongst her peers. And the daughter is now realizing that, wow, this is worse than we thought it was. This isn't the environment that's supportive of my mom. She needs memory care assisted living. So I think that for whatever reason, whether it's guilt or denial or maybe just not being educated on the differences, families, make that choice, and it turns out maybe it's not the best choice. So I tell families, don't beat yourself up. You obviously maybe you didn't know, but now you do, and now you know what you know, and now it's time to take that step and make that. So we have a few minutes left, Liz, before we have to go, and I thought it might be fun to do a quick little role play with you because this is what we do all the time, with families. And you and I have role played before, and it was quite a fun, actually, because we can see both sides. We can see the community side, we can see the family side. So I'm going to set up it real quick. We're going to just a real minute or two of role play. So I'm the daughter. I'm coming to you to take a tour, and I walk in and I have an appointment, but the first thing I say is, okay, Liz, I have 5 minutes. So I want to take the tour. I want you to tell me everything you need to know, but I got to go in 5 minutes because I have a work appointment and I got to go, but I got to figure out what to do with my mom. So let's go.
Well, tell me, where is your mom now? Because in 5 minutes, we're not going to be able to tell you what it is that you need to know. So why don't you tell me where your mom is now, and then why don't we schedule something maybe tomorrow, whatever works for you, where you have more time, so that we can adequately review what's going on and how we can best help you.
All right, that's perfect, because I've had people come in and they want the whole shebang in 5 minutes, and there's no way, the point is there's no way to adequately experience a community, find out all the answers to all the questions that we talked about early in the show in 5 minutes. You got to spend the time. You got to do your research. Okay, one more really quick one. I'm a daughter, and you're taking me on a tour, and it's for my mom. And as we're walking around, and you show me a room, and all of a sudden, I'm like, oh my gosh, my mom's not going to like this room. Look at it; it's so small and it's tiny, and I wouldn't want to live here because it's too small. It's not big enough for all my things. This isn't going to work for my mom. What would you say to her?
I would say, I know the room is small, but it's small for a reason. Because we don't want somebody to isolate themselves in their room. If it's too big, it'll be a reason why they're not going to come out. So that we want to make sure that people, I like to say that when on our units, it's a house with 14 bedrooms. So it's not like a living room. That's why we have a living room and a dining room, so that people don't just stay in their rooms. And if it's too large, they get lost in the room. So that's why they're designed specifically for that.
That's right. So that's the answer. That's great. Liz, I'm sorry we're out of time. I wish we had more time with you. You're a doll. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you, audience, for tuning in and watching the Caregiver Solution Info Show. We'll have another show for you next week, same time, same place, 6 p.m. on Tuesdays on caregiversolutions.info or on the iHeartRadio app under WNN. So hope to see you next time. And enjoy your retirement, Liz.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Solutions with Marcia Teal. Join us next week as Marcia, who has 15 years of Alzheimer's disease and dementia care experience, brings you more needed information to help with the care of your loved one. This show can be seen again on caregiversolutions.info, and questions can be left on the site, which may be used on the program to help others. See you next week for more Caregiver Solutions.